Carstensz Pyramid is the highest point on the island of New Guinea at almost 5,000 metres above sea level. It's part of the Seven Summits Circuit, the quest to reach the highest point on each of the world's 7 continents. Carstensz is located in the Papua province of Indonesia towards the western end of New Guinea. The remoteness of the mountain and the political situation in Papua make the logistics to reach the mountain quite complex. Back in the 1990s, climbing teams were helicoptered in, but now the only legal access is via a 6-day trek from the north through the jungle and highlands, a distance of 60 kilometres. The trek passes through several temperate climates, starting in the jungle with plenty of mud and humidity. It rained every day. Then up to moorland and eventually high alpine terrain, the approach trek concludes at a seemingly idyllic base camp by an alpine lake. The trek has been described by many on the Seven Summits Circuit as the hardest trek in the world. It is certainly a wild jungle trek like no other, for various reasons. After trekking for 6 days through wilderness, you may be surprised to find the campsite next door is occupied by the world's largest gold mine and second largest copper mine. The Freeport or Grasberg mine employs 20,000 people working at 4,000 metres in a hostile high-altitude environment. The mine is linked to the coast by a 100-kilometre private road to transport workers and equipment and a 160-kilometre pipeline for transporting the mineral ore. I was told by our guides that the mine holds all of the helicopter licences for the province, hence why a helicopter approach to Carstensz is no longer possible. This is the story of our wild jungle trek and Carstensz climb. It all starts with a flight to Bali, then a flight to the Papua province, landing in Timika. We had another 2 internal flights via Jayapura and then Nabire, where we stayed the night, presenting an opportunity to purchase last-minute essential equipment. What are you buying, Liam? You're buying rubber boots to go mountain climbing. This right. Is the way it's done.
In Papua, 6 climbers search for rubber boots.
And an umbrella.
With which to negotiate the highest mountain in the continent.
You look like a bit of an aristocrat.
Oh, really? This is a bit aristocratic, isn't it? It's the fluoro.
Not with the
41.
You see, they thin. With this one, actually, they sit up more.
This is tough.
Do you have 40 and a half?
3/4. 40 and 3/4. That is the quote of the trip so far.
That would be the best.
Do you have a 40 and a half?
Well, we've made it onto the island of New Guinea now. It's unbelievably hot, sticky and humid. Everything's as disorganised as you would probably expect. The next step is now to fly up into the hills, meet the local people and start the trek. The next morning we flew up into the mountains to the airstrip at Shugapa. That was my 5th flight in 48 hours, not a good carbon footprint. We were an unusually large group of 16 clients and 4 guides, so we needed 3 planes to transport us. We'd had a bumpy ride passing a couple of thunderstorms, and everyone was a little nervous on the approach to the mountain airstrip, but our pilots were in complete control. Well, we're now one step nearer. We've managed to fly up to Shugapa. We're here in the mountains. Maybe a 40% chance now, I reckon, of getting to the bottom of the mountain. We were surprised to find the population of Shugapa village had congregated at the airstrip to welcome our arrival. We were soon to realise why. Money has come to town. We wandered across to the village administration centre. For the trek and climb, we'd be away from Shugapa for 12 days, needing 40 to 50 people to help carry food and equipment. We were going to be a transient community of 60 to 70 people for the next 2 weeks. The whole village has turned out, and also the people from the next village up valley have come down So that throng of people there, they're trying to get a job as porters on our expedition. Some heated negotiations going on. I believe negotiations have progressed fairly well. Negotiations seem to have taken a turn for the worst after shouting had died down for about an hour. We left the negotiations for a wander around the village. So apparently we are the centre of attention, Liam reckons. Let's just have a look, see who was actually staring at us. Which Liam reckons will be pretty much everyone. Everyone. Liam purchasing some last minute snacks from Shugaka.
Chocolate wafer.
How much was the chocolate wafer?
I gave her $1 and she gave me 5. Any cents?
We were spectators throughout the negotiations, trying to gauge the progress through body language, but tension seemed high throughout. Well, we're now into the 4th hour of negotiations, and still no idea if we're any further forward or not. I think things have progressed now, so once again people are being called into our little compound here, and some bags are being brought out. Well, we have received the order to move, so we've started moving. However, one bunch of the local people are trying to block the road. Although Yosh, one of our guides, seems not too concerned.
We're going, we're not. We're going, we're not. Some last minute aggression.
Yep.
And a bit of spear action.
Oh, I missed the spear action.
There was a bit of eye-pot spears going on. He's been taken aside quietly by one of our guys.
It's a 6-day trek to base camp with fairly even distances each day. Alternate camp options are available if groups are quicker or slower than average. Day 1 is an 11-kilometre walk, the first 7 kilometres on a newly bulldozed road. Well, after about 5 hours of negotiations, we're on our way. It was a relief to start moving, but we were already into the early afternoon. Well, that movement was fairly short-lived. All we've managed to do was make it to the end of town, and the locals have stopped us here because apparently we don't have enough time now to walk to the next village before nightfall. So instead we're going to pay them to take us on motorbike to the next village. They're very good at squeezing every extra bit of money out of us that they can. The fairly new bulldozed road was already showing signs of subsidence on the steep hillsides. Our progress was short-lived. Well, we made it all of about 2 kilometres there to the next set of houses where the villagers had already got a roadblock set up to stop us, so they're now negotiating a toll to let us past. So yeah, this is our 4th roadblock. We've only come maybe 4 kilometres at best. But there is rain coming, so I reckon the rain may dampen the enthusiasm of the locals to barricade us. In total, there were 9 blockades to intercept us. Our guides did the negotiating. I assume the New South Wales government has been advising the Papuan locals. The prevalence of tolls is similar to driving around Sydney. And here we've reached the end of the road. It was a relief to leave the road and start the trek towards Carstensz. We were greeted in the villages by smiles and curiosity. Communication with the local people was through smiles and gestures because we both spoke different languages. Hello. Any discussion had to go through the interpretation of our group leaders. Well, every single expedition I go on, it's always such a relief and a morale booster to get out onto the trail and actually start heading towards the mountain. No more so than this time. After all of the blockades and renegotiations and things like that, we're actually now out on our way to the mountain, so very happy now to be moving on. So now, I reckon that'll probably give us a 66% chance of getting to base camp. There's not many people now between us and the mountain to stop us, so things are looking pretty good. For our first night of the trek, we stopped in the final village before the jungle, camping in the village plaza with commanding views across the valley. We had a peaceful night, happy to leave behind the stressful negotiations of the day and focus on the trek ahead. We awoke to a lovely morning with birds singing and fresh mountain air, but it soon became clear that the village leader wanted more money than was agreed the night before. So it's morning on day 2 of our trek, and the village have been certainly very welcoming and friendly, very hospitable overnight, but negotiations have started. They just want a bit of money off us before we can leave and continue on with our trek. Well, the local villagers are all very friendly here. There's no animosity at all. A couple of machetes have been waved around, but there was no real intent to it. I think just general bewilderment towards us, really. They don't really know what to make of us. Well, negotiations have been going for about an hour now. It was all quite interesting and novel at first, but in the 35-degree heat, and it's only 9:30 in the morning, it's starting to lose its charm. Not entirely sure, but everyone's now got up and started walking around, so I guess they've come to terms. Of course, if it was just a bunch of foreigners coming here, they'd start their negotiations at $20, you'd say no, then they'd say 19, and you'd say done, and then you just get on with it. However, for the expedition organisers, I guess they can't just do that. They have to try and bargain down to the standard $10 fee that they normally pay. There you go, hour and a half's worth of negotiations, and alright, well, we're on our way. Day 2 was to be a 7-kilometre walk to Mud Camp, a shorter day than most groups have. The farmland disappeared immediately, then around 15 minutes without tree cover. Then we entered the jungle canopy that would engulf us for the next day and a half. A rough but well-trodden track had been hacked through the jungle. We would be following a very muddy track for the next 4 days. It was at this point that I wondered if I had made a mistake not to buy rubber boots for the trek. I was wearing my mountaineering boots in case we were to encounter snow high up on Carstensz. It was so humid trekking in the jungle. Man, the water's just pouring out of me. As we progressed up the valley, we encountered a number of large tributaries that had to be crossed. Previous parties had made wooden bridges that look a bit rickety, but felt solid enough, and we were grateful that they were there. The fast-flowing and turbulent waters were proof that the area has high rainfall, which we were soon to realise with rain every day. In total, our group was about 70 members, trudging in a long line through the mud. All equipment and food needed to be carried for the 12 days that we'd be away from Shugapa. Well, here's our camp for the second night. It's going to be pretty difficult to find enough room for 10 tents and room for our 50 porters as well. Sanitation is also a challenge, with 70 people needing the toilet, wandering into the forest and digging a hole in the ground, but some only venturing to the camp perimeter. It was a 6-hour trek for most of the group, but a few arrived 3 hours later after dark.
We're here. 2,222 metres.
This is a typical afternoon melody, rain on the tent, just after 5 o'clock, not far from dark now, so just having a rest before dinner. The rain continued for most of the night. Day 2 of the wild jungle trek was over. Breaking camp on day 3 of the trek. Day 3 for us was 10 kilometres from mud camp to swamp camp, gaining 1,300 metres in elevation. We spent the first hour of day 3 walking upstream along the river, with the steep banks often forcing us down to the water's edge. We then climbed out of the valley to higher ground, but the streams we encountered were still raging torrents. The vegetation in the jungle was otherworldly, completely different to any other trek that I'd been on. The thick moss, the creepers, and the dense thickets meant that following the track was our only option.
The mud. The mud has been a dominant theme of this expedition.
Well, we've been in the jungle for the best part of the last 2 days. It gets a bit claustrophobic after a while, so it's nice to get to our first moorland, but we're about to go back into the jungle. Well, after 2.5 hours, this is the normal Camp 2 for the groups that don't get as severely blockaded as we did. We stopped for lunch in the clearing, happy to be out in the open, away from the claustrophobic clutches of the jungle's grasp. We started trekking again after lunch. The cloud and mist had rolled in, and soon it would be drizzle and then rain. So we've reached our camp almost for the third night. It's just there at the right of the screen. There's a bit of a grassy area over the top of the swamp. My executive business umbrella turned out to be an excellent investment. The rain was constant throughout the afternoon, making the temperature quite pleasant for walking. I was just behind the first group to arrive at swamp camp, a leisurely 7 hours of trekking for day 3. Everyone pitched in to get the tents, shelters and camp set up in the rain, but only half of the travelling caravan had made it to camp so far. We retired into our tents to get dry and await the rest of the group to arrive. Well, the hardest trekking in the world maybe lived up to its bill yesterday. Half of the team arrived after dark. It would be quite amazing walking around in the jungle and the swamp at night. The first members got here at about 3:30 and the last person was in just before 10 o'clock. Quite a variation from the first to last members. Well, at this time every day we take malaria for breakfast. This is breakfast on day 4. Well, we're through the hardest of the trekking now. It's only been about 4 hours today. So our camp this morning, centre of screen in the middle of the moorland there, and steep climbing out.
It's exactly the same one, still didn't change it.
Day 4 was to be a 9-kilometre trek to Ridge Camp with great views and only a slight elevation gain. This is an alternate campsite in the next hanging valley about half an hour further on. We'll likely use this campsite on our return trek. The vegetation changes on day 4 to stunted bushes and tree ferns, no more tree canopy, with the trekking now on high, broad ridges rather than in the valleys. Well, with 16 members in the team and 4 local guides and maybe up to 50 porters, it certainly does feel like we're in the middle of Pitt Street Mall at times. But so far I've managed to find a gap and be alone for maybe an hour at a time, which is great just to be alone and to see all the sights and hear the sounds and just experience the solitude and be left alone to reflect on your life and your own thoughts. I was getting a little bit out of breath there. I was a bit worried I was getting a bit soft, but I've just looked at my watch and we're at 3,600 metres, so I guess it's not that surprising to be out of breath, and we're now starting to acclimatise. There is our first view of Carstensz through the mist. There are wide views from day 4 onwards. Another rain squall is approaching, just in time for lunch. Well, it's the first afternoon that we've had when it hasn't been raining. We've got great views here. Perfect day. We can see onto the main range, and there's our camp for tonight. Well, an example of how honest and reliable the local people are. There's a mother and son yesterday wanted to break out a load to share between them, but they waited for a Westerner to come past just to witness them going into the bag to share out all of the things, which they didn't need to do. I was quite touched by their honesty, and I felt a little bit guilty really for the fact that they needed to prove that they are trustworthy. But it was a nice, touching moment to see that. Camp for night 4 is Ridge Camp, at about 3,600 metres above sea level. But there's still no escaping the sodden ground with tents pitched around pools. It's a relief to dry your feet at the end of each day, although you do get wet again every time you leave the tent for the toilet or to gather with the group for dinner. Steaming feet at the end of the day, very wet. Well, I think it's been dry from 5 o'clock in the morning through to about 11 o'clock in the morning every day, but it has rained every single afternoon and all the way through into the evening. I think we've only had one dinner time where it hasn't been raining. It's not entirely minimum impact camping. Well, we're only 2 days away from base camp now, so I'm about 95% certain that we're going to make it. Quite a transition. Normally, on my expeditions, I'm normally getting pretty anxious about what the weather patterns are going to be like and whether we are going to get a summit attempt or not, but I feel very relaxed for some reason on this trip. I guess I'm pretty confident that we are going to get to base camp and we are going to get a summit attempt. So here's the kitchen, certainly testing conditions, but the guides do very well at cooking for us. We fell asleep most nights to a lovely serenade from our group of local helpers. We were happy to hear their good spirits in these testing conditions. Well, it rained again last night. All our gear is wet, the whole countryside is sodden, even at 3,500 metres. It's amazing that the locals can live like this, but I guess they have no option. They're born here and then they live here, and that's it. It's a reminder for how fortunate we are to be born in the Western world and to actually have options.
Cut that.
and Liam there is just showing off the lunchbox that we all get to trek with each day.
Yes.
I think that stuff's been in Liam's lunchbox for about 4 days.
7 days.
Day 5 to Dingo Camp was the longest distance at 11 kilometres, yet the least time, given the easier terrain and less mud. The ground was waterlogged, but still quite firm, allowing quick progress. The Day 5 trek leads to the base of the main range. Fantastic views on a clear day. It was about 11 kilometres with minimal elevation gain. Even though we're at 3,500 metres, 10,000 feet above sea level, and everything is wet, including our clothes and our boots, the temperature near the equator is still pleasant. I just needed shorts and a t-shirt to walk in. Limestone outcroppings begin to appear as we contour into the next main valley. They've been weathered into many interesting shapes and formations. The raging torrent in the valley has to be crossed via stepping stones, which were quite slippery in the wet. With teamwork and support, everyone makes it across without falling in. On our return, the water had receded significantly, revealing a mini moss-lined canyon. In the good weather in between our visits, the next group had manufactured a bridge during a fair weather window. Some interesting rock formations. And the rain has come a bit earlier today, at 11 o'clock. Well, this isn't much fun. It's been heavy rain for about an hour and a half now. How you going, Spaz?
Like I said, I feel like $1 million.
With the constant rain, every trekker needs a strong character with determination and resilience. Camp 5 is Dingo Camp at 3,700 metres. A family of dingoes live in the area. Clearly there are enough trekking groups that pass by for the dingo family to make a living from dropped food or from food carelessly left in the open, unprotected. In fine weather, this would be a fantastic setting to sit out, relax and admire the surrounding limestone cliffs and mountainscape. But that was not to be for us.
So, here are all the local people getting warm around the fire. Nice and warm. Pretty smoky, but they're able to get everything dry. And I guess sleep on the sort of straw. Ah, no, okay. Well, that wasn't a very fun day, really. The last 3 hours we were in pouring rain, and we got to camp at about 2 o'clock, but we had to wait around here soaking wet for about half an hour for the porters to arrive with all the tents. I mean, a very tough day for them. But managed to get the tent up and then jump inside and get all the wet stuff off, and then I've been lying here in my sleeping bag and all my down stuff on, trying to warm up for the last 4 hours. Anyway, the rain's still going. Hopefully it'll clear up tomorrow morning so we can get some of the stuff dry again before walking up to base camp. Well, the day has dawned, but it hasn't brought direct sunlight with it. Still going to try and dry some things off in the breeze, but it's not entirely comfortable here on the sodden ground. Everything's wet. It's going to be quite uncomfortable starting the trek off, but we move up to base camp today.
Day 6 to base camp is just over 6 kilometres with a 900 metre elevation gain to New Zealand Pass, then a 300 metre descent to base camp on the other side.
So we've just started trekking up to base camp, and we've walked around to Larsen Lake. Still raining. It's pretty much been raining for most of the last 24 hours.
We were soon to find that there'd been a recent landslide in the next valley, and the rockfall was continuing, right where our track passed by on the side of the lake.
It's been a recent landslide here. I certainly don't fancy walking across it.
We stood there a while, observing the movements, trying to get a gauge for whether the land would slide again. The less patient in the group forged ahead, while I decided to take the long bush-bashing option around the far side of the lake. Once past the lake, the track climbed steeply through rocky outcrops. The rain didn't let up all day. Such a shame. This would be the highlight day of the trek in fine weather. You'd stop many times to stare in awe at the breathtaking scenery, but for us, the unpleasant weather meant that we just had to keep moving to stay warm. We're now over 4,000 metres above sea level, cooler temperature. I upgraded to waterproof trousers over my shorts and a waterproof jacket. I admit this was quite a miserable day, constant rain and struggling to breathe with less oxygen. It was quite cold.
We're at about 4,100 metres at the moment. We're approaching New Zealand Pass, which will then take us down into base camp. Sure would be a lovely walk if you could see where you were going. So we still haven't seen the mountain yet. But it's a great experience. That's a new experience for me, rock climbing with an umbrella. 4,300 metres, New Zealand Pass. I'm certainly feeling the effects of altitude. Could be anywhere in the world here, really. This might be where Neil Armstrong landed in 1969, although he certainly got better visibility the day he was here.
New Zealand Pass is 4,500 metres, a notch in the ridge crest on the northern chain of the main range. The trek into the valley affords impressive views of the Carstensz North Wall, imposing, but cut by hundreds of lines across its wide face. It was a relief to be here after all of the uncertainty of the trek. Finally, after 6 days of walking, challenging conditions and various renegotiations with the local population, we had reached the base of the mountain. Our objective that has been the key focus in our lives for months leading up to the expedition. Our local group of helpers were so tough, an inspiration. Many were walking shoeless through the rocky terrain, carrying heavy loads. We were all aware that our expedition would not be possible without their help.
It never stops raining.
Hello!
Oh, well, that's probably the heaviest rain that we've had the whole trip so far. Just got to try and get in, get all your wet clothes off, get your dry stuff on, get into the sleeping bag and warm up. Don't worry about washing.
We settled ourselves in for 3 nights at base camp, ready to make our summer attempt.
Well, after trekking for 6 days through the jungle and the high meadows, we've made it to base camp. This is going to be our home for the next 3 nights. We'll have a look around, but before we do, there's an interesting formation here. Zebra wall.
Base camp is comfortable and seemingly idyllic. However, it has been alleged that the lakes are polluted from previous mining explorations. Most expeditions will plan for 2 full days at base camp, offering a contingency summit day in case of bad weather, or a rest day if the group is tired. Given that we were a group of 16, we divided into 2 summit groups. I was in the first summit group that would make our summit attempt that first night at base camp, just several hours after arriving. Base camp is a lovely place on a clear day. You can wander around, taking in the views from different angles, and on my second day at base camp, I climbed the middle ridge, giving an excellent vantage point for the normal climbing route and the Freeport mine too. The scope for new routes on Carstensz is immense. You could climb here for weeks and weeks. Only the logistics are problematic for how you transport your food here. Our expedition followed the normal route on the north face. Well, it's 1:30 in the morning and we're just taking breakfast before heading off on our summit bid. Alright, well, after about an hour of walking, we've reached the bottom of the fixed ropes, so I'll put our gear on and start climbing. We started climbing in the dark to give as many daylight hours as possible in case anything went wrong, with the goal of being off the mountain before the afternoon rain showers. It's always funny climbing at night. You can't see very far, so you don't know how far, how high the different sections of the climb are going to be. And so you just keep going, you attach to the rope all of the time. Oh, there is the mine. Climbing in the dark, the ropes were invaluable for route finding as we followed the illuminated circles of our head torches. A highlight of every alpine start is the pre-dawn silhouetted skyline. The normal route follows a series of ramps up onto the summit ridge. I'm now going to take the suspense out of the storyline. There's going to be some discontinuity in the footage from now on, with the climbing shot over 3 different phases. Firstly on the ascent, then the descent, and then finally today on the second summit day, which is a perfect day. This is the base of the route, with an obvious track in daylight. There's about 5 sections of fixed rope to get you up onto the ridge. The first 3 are almost in kind of canyon-like sections going up narrow gullies up the rock face where water has carved out a groove in the rock. So you're climbing up there, very easy, kind of a slab on the left and then a wall on the right, so you're able to sort of bridge yourself up. It was only maybe a grade 1 and 2 scramble. Fixed ropes in there, but they weren't really required. I think one thing that surprised me the most was the amount of loose rock, especially on the first section of fixed ropes. There was maybe a couple of ledges where you had to walk 5-10 metres, all on a bit of a scree slope, so the first few people knocked a whole heap of rocks down, which when you're down below near the bottom of the group, it's not much fun dodging bullets coming past. Got one big whack on the hand. It's still a bit swollen the second day, and got a lot of bangs on the helmet as well. So bring a helmet and put your best and most agile climbers first, who aren't going to be knocking rocks down onto the rest of the party. We attached to the fixed ropes throughout the climb, not knowing the difficulties ahead. However, having reclimbed in daylight, the climb is a thoroughly enjoyable scramble, and the rope's not necessary for the most part. This is the large scree bench between the third and fourth fixed ropes. The fourth section of fixed rope opens out onto a face above a big sloping scree ledge. The rock's actually quite high quality. It's a type of limestone. The rock is very good. Even when it's slimy, it's actually got very good grip. It's very grippy. So you've got a lot of confidence as you're climbing up on it, even with a layer of water and slime over the top. Lots of water runnels carved into the rock. Well, I think we've been very fortunate with our 2 summit days. The best 2 days of the expedition so far have been these 2 summit days. The fixed rope anchors were mainly pitons and threaded natural features, typically synchronised well across 2 pieces. There was also the occasional bolt and even a tri-cam for variety. We climbed in trekking shoes without crampons, not expecting to find much snow. Most of the snow had actually melted away by the next morning for the second summit team to make their attempt. It's okay, I showed Liam the rope once he'd got up to me. And the 5th section is a final fairly vertical section to get you up onto the summit ridge. And that climb to get you up onto the summit ridge was probably the most technical of the whole section, maybe a grade 3 scramble. But the rock's very broken, so there's just handholds and footholds everywhere all over the place. The grain of the rock is a bit more vertical, so there's a bit of lay backing or pulling out on the different grooves to get the friction to climb up. But it was all very easy and a whole heap of fun climbing. I think my most favourite section of the climb was getting up onto the summit ridge. I was in the lead at that point, so I was powering on ahead, enjoying the climbing, and then you pull up onto the summit ridge and then all of a sudden you've got views in maybe 270 degrees all around. The cloud and mist hadn't really formed at that point, so you had perfect views, had the interesting view of the mine, and then wandered along the summit ridge to the Troian Traverse. That was a fantastic experience. The highlight of the climb for me, just walking above all of the clouds and all of the other mountains and land all around. The most difficult section, and I guess the most interesting section, was the Troian Traverse. Added quite a fun and exciting aspect to the climb, other than the actual rock climbing itself. We were maybe there for about an hour. It took a while to sort of set up. There's a whole heap of different ropes there, but we attached to 3 of them and also put a safety on as well. Pulled ourselves across. And the Troian Traverse is maybe only 10 metres, it's not very far, but you can certainly see a long way down. And I don't think many of the team members had done that before. Certainly that was a new experience for me. Quite a bit of fun. It takes a bit of commitment, I suppose, to set yourself off away there, but because you're upside down you can't actually see the height of the drop beneath you, which maybe that's a good thing. We unclipped from the main ropes and were able to scramble off to the side. The summit ridge is tremendous fun, in a fantastic position of exposure with great feeling and atmosphere. The route weaves around a few rock towers and crosses a couple of unnerving notches in the ridgeline. The climbing felt a little tenuous at times with the snow cover, and progress was a little slow given the group of 9. The summit ridge lasted much longer than I expected, and there always seemed to be another high point visible after bypassing each tower. It took almost an hour from the Troian Traverse to reach the summit, about 6 hours from base camp, arriving just after 8 o'clock, but the mist had settled with the sun burning off the new snowfall. The whole team reached the summit together, so we managed to capture a full team photo on the summit.
We were all very happy to be on top, lots of high fives and handshakes and hugs.
Encapsulating the lovely team spirit that had been fostered during the approach trek. Given all of the uncertainties and logistical chaos of the past week, it was a relief to remove ourselves from that situation and enjoy for a few moments the achievement of our objective. Carstensz is the highest point in Southeast Asia and a great summit. But we must always remember the mighty Mount Kosciuszko in Australia, the true 7th continental summit. After an hour on the summit, it was time to return to the chaotic world below.
Oh, it's great to have come here and to have got to the top. The experience has been so much more rewarding than I expected. The hiking, the trekking through the jungle was fantastic. Sharing each day with the local Dani tribe on their traditional land has been a fantastic experience. The French climber Lionel Terray once said of mountaineers, "We're all just conquistadors of the useless." Well, that was Carstensz Pyramid. It's now time to pack away at base camp, trek back through the jungle for 4 days, 2 days of flights back to Sydney and normal life. But we're already planning our next adventure and maybe the conquest of the next useless. So let's have a look at our tent. We've all got 3-man tents between 2 people. Plenty of room to get all our gear inside for when it's raining. And Liam is trying to hide the fact that he has a female thermarest. It's a nice pattern. What do you reckon, Liam?
Look, it grew on me at first, and now I look 1 or 2 each.
Well, 1 or 2 each. Did you know everyone ate the food on our summit day? So we came back and there was no food.
We ate all of our food.
So we had no food to eat after we'd been to the summit. But hey, you know, nobody ever suspects the neck gaiter.
Bang bang!
A bang bang fest.
Never eat our summit food again. Oh dear.
Following our summit climbs, 4 of the members were evacuated by Global Rescue. We had a leisurely morning packing up base camp, then started our return trek. We returned to Dingo Camp, Camp 5, then back out to Shagapa in 2.5 days, half the time that it took on the approach.
Well, we're about 100 metres away from some motorbikes. They're going to take us to Shagapa. Liam and I were just discussing, it's a funny feeling this, where we're still out in the wilderness, we're still on the expedition, and very shortly we're just going to be transferred from a wild place where you can just urinate anywhere you want to the world of Coca-Cola, which is a wonderful world, but you kind of get to this point, you just want to have another day, maybe, in the wilderness. The wonderful world of Coca-Cola. Life's not so bad on the other side.